IGN confirms Xbox will join other major games publishers in raising prices of its major new first-party titles from $60 to $70 starting in 2023. It's funny because just like yesterday, I threw out like this little video, and it became a TikTok where we said like, yeah, no, obviously Xbox is going to raise prices eventually. Like obviously they have to. And right now Game Pass is a really good value, but it only long-term works, these subscription models, as a business plan if you are either growing by getting new members, which is the current phase that Game Pass is in, or by basically raising prices on customers. And all of this is compounded by inflation, which is an actual thing. I find it so frustrating that so many people, when you bring up like the realities of inflation on business and the value of the dollar and things, people act like, oh, you corporate shill. I'm like, no, like your money is worth less now too. Like this is true also of you. Like this isn't just corporations doing this stuff. It's true for everybody, right? Like there's nothing new here. And honestly, it's insane that $60 was maintained as the price for AAA games for like 15 plus years. But that's just how it is, because consumers become really attached to those price points. But Sony came out first and said, hey, $70. And honestly, they had the games that they could demand that with, like God of War and these other projects. So it's just kind of the standard. And pretty soon, I would expect by the end of this console generation, the average price paid for a game will probably be closer to like 85 to 90, because there's going to be a lot of pre-order packages. There's going to be, you know, the standard thing where the season pass is $30 or $40. And so people on average are spending like $100 a game. That's going to be very, very standard. I don't know. I'm not surprised by it. I am waiting for the inevitable raise in Game Pass pricing. They're definitely going to be waiting to reveal that until after this Activision deal is settled, because they don't want that bad PR in the middle of this storm. So I get that. That makes sense. But what are you going to do? It's funny how the director of Callisto Protocol mentioned how price of games should go up considering the amount of work going into them, and then proceeds to launch a broken, fully priced game. Is a little funny. I mean, according to him, the brokenness was because one employee rushed something and patched the wrong file. Which, if that's true, all of this crap, like, it just goes to show you, you can have a game that's really solid, but one employee makes a mistake, and then the permanent public opinion of that product is tainted. People will forever now think of Callisto Protocol as that Dead Space spiritual successor that launched broken on PC. You know? It's just, and according to the game's director, it was one person rushing that caused that issue, which is crazy. But yeah, they're raising the price. That's a bit of a bummer for a lot of Xbox fans, but also like the general vibe in the comment section, as we can see, is one of like, oh, well, Game Pass, you know, is even more valuable now. Yeah, Nintendo games be like, I'm $60 and will never go on sale too. Yeah, Xbox, it's Sony's fault. Nope, it's just the way of the world. Inflation's a thing. Inflation is always a thing, for the record. Like, don't get it twisted and start trying to blame like Trump or Biden or somebody. Like, no, this is just, it can be accelerated by certain monetary or fiscal policy, mostly monetary policy, but like, it's also just a thing that happens. Like, people say like, oh, well, back in the day you could buy a full gallon of, or a full tank of gas for your car for like 15 cents and half a ham sandwich. And it's like, yeah, like times change. That's right. You could do that, but that 15 cents to you would be worth like $40 to you now, right? So it's not like you paying 15 cents for that. You know, people be like, back in my day, hamburgers were 5 cents a piece. It's like, yeah, but you made 5 cents an hour. So like, shut up. Come on. If game cost it was adjusted for inflation, we'd be playing like $120 at this point. Yeah. No, and it's like, I forget what it was. Maybe I can just look this up. Full price of games in let's just do 1980. What about 1980? Okay. So Just this. While nominal cartridge game prices in the early 80s topped out at 30 to 40 bucks, inflation makes that equivalent to $80 to $100 a game these days. That means to like casually buy that game we just made the video on the main channel, E.T., to just casually buy that would be like, the equivalent of 80 to 100 bucks. And that game is horrible. That game's dreadful. And that's not a great example, sure, because that's a horrible game. Yeah, this is in 2020. So more realistically, it's much closer to like $100. I mean, we could do inflation calculator. If in 1982, let's do 2, I purchased an item for, let's say, 40 bucks, premium AAA game. Then in 2022, the same item would cost, calculate. Okay, I was like 30 bucks. That doesn't make any sense. $123. So like if people think that like, yeah, these game prices are ridiculous. No, people used to be making, like, the difference was that there were certainly many fewer units being sold of games at this time. So like Callisto Protocol is probably going to sell 1 million units or 2 million units or something like that. Whereas E.T. or one of these other like 80s games might sell, a few tens of thousands in the same period of time. So, but like the difference was also that like E.T. in those games could be made by one person or by 2 or 3 people, right? So it's just different. It's just different. But yeah, I mean, that should tell you just how much this has changed. And I mean, even if we change to like 60 bucks, maybe in 2010, compared to now, 60 bucks for a full AAA title. Let's go Skyrim. 2011. 60 bucks to buy Skyrim. Nowadays, to be, as equal as possible, that would be worth like 80 bucks for a new title. So when I see them only raise the price to 70, I actually think that we're ending up a little bit ahead of where they could, I think, reasonably argue that the price should sit at. And of course, again, it's not as simple as just this, because there's considerations like this, where you have to look at, say, like right now, most game sales are through like digital storefronts. So there's not the cost of shipping and producing the discs and things like that. Some games still do that, of course. They still do that in some capacity. But a ton of people are buying digitally compared to physically nowadays. But over 500,000 units returned. Yeah, E.T. Ooh, Brandon. E.T. sold 1.5 million copies on release, actually. E.T. sold 1.5 million units on release and over 2.6 million by the end of 1982. I kind of mentioned that in the video. They called it a grandma seller, is what the employees of department stores and stuff called it, because apparently kids weren't buying it in huge numbers. It was grandparents, parents, older siblings, aunts, uncles, who were buying it for the young kids who were into video games. The kids didn't think, like, the word of mouth traveled within the schools, and they're like, oh dude, the game is terrible. But all of the parents were like, we saw E.T., we loved that movie, so I'll get him the video game, it'll be great. And so it ended up selling gangbusters initially because all the grandparents were super into it and thought that it was going to be just a video game on this movie we like. But then it ended up like crashing after that, which is really funny. In the UK, we are actually being overcharged for games now. £70 estimates roughly to $82, which basically means we're being fucked. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, that type of thing. It's not as bad as Australia. Australia, Imperium and Rocky will tell you, I mean, prices of games are stupid. But it's because, like, I think it was Linus Tech Tips was also saying Canadian inflation is also crazy high. So, like, he calls it in all of their videos. He's like, yeah, no, it's monopoly money. it's Canadian monopoly money, basically. He took my thing. Red flag.